This week's focus is narrative writing. So, narrative writing is about telling a personal, significant story. And so, stories are super important. They've been with us since before we could even write. And they help us share lessons and also reflect our experiences and share those with readers. So, our focus is to create a strong narrative. So we'll start with a little bit of food for thought. Why do we tell so many stories? Think about how often your experiences and the experiences you share with others are told through story. You're more likely to remember a really great story than you are just a fact alone, or even a bulleted list of ideas. But what makes a story great? What is it that sets story apart from other forms of writing and also that makes a really good narrative or story really, really good? Well, it could be this idea that stories help encapsulate so many different aspects of what it means to communicate and be a human. So they provide your reader with information, they give your reader new knowledge about that information, that experience, they put that information in context, and they're emotional. We're emotional creatures as human beings. We sometimes gravitate towards writing that helps us clearly feel an emotion. So, how is it that you can encapsulate all four of these things: information, knowledge, context, and emotion in a piece of narrative writing? Well, first of all, a good story or narrative uses concrete language. So, concrete, the opposite of that is abstract. Concrete is anything that appeals to the five senses. So, if you can see it, smell it, taste it, touch it, hear it, it is concrete. If you can't, something like love or freedom, that's an idea. Stories help us understand these abstract ideas by using concrete language. A great story gives us important details about what something looks like, what it smelled like, what it sounded like, what it felt like, what it tasted like. So those five senses are what help put your reader into the narrative. And so sometimes you might have a little bit of trouble figuring out what details to include in your writing. So I like to share with you guys the RENS model. It's just a quick little checklist that can help you figure out where details belong and how you can come up with details. And so RENS stands for reasons, examples, names, numbers, and senses. And so reasons explain why something happened. Examples flesh out that why and say how it happened. Names let us know who was involved and where it happened. Numbers could relate to when it happened, a date, and how many people were involved. And then we've got the five senses there. So if you ever need to find a way to add detail to a narrative, use this RENS model. Are you explaining reasons, examples, names, numbers, and senses? And so one of the other places we can look to for help with creating a good, strong narrative is Ira Glass of This American Life. And so he talks about what a story's building blocks are. And he says that a story's building blocks are an anecdote, so that sequence of events, and a moment of reflection when the author says, this is why all of these events happened. And so Ira Glass is the head producer for This American Life, which is in essence all about story. That is all that This American Life does, is produce stories and tell other stories. Finally, there are a few storytelling commandments or best practices that you can follow to really, really strengthen your narratives. And so these commandments come from Robert McKee, who is a writer and helps teach others how to write. So, one of his commandments is, Thou shalt not make life easy for the protagonist. There has to be some kind of conflict in a narrative. And so, I've got my example here of Harry Potter. In Harry Potter, Harry does not have it easy, neither do his companions, right? They go through trials, tribulations. There is an ultimate goal for Harry, or goals. And finally, there's that climax where he has to really, really tackle some tough decisions and some tough actions. So life isn't easy for him. And that's what makes it interesting. In a narrative, you're the protagonist. So don't be afraid to let us know when you face challenges as you went along in your narrative process. And his next commandment is respect thine audience. And so what that means is that you make sure that you find a way to make the story relevant to your audience. And this actually goes in line with the next commandment, which is, thou shalt take your characters to the end of the line. So both of these really relate to ensuring that your audience has reflection at the end and we understand why this was important for you. And then finally, the last piece of advice Robert McKee has is, thou shalt rewrite, right? So revision, rewriting, looking back over what you've already created and making it stronger and better is a very important part of writing a strong narrative. And remember, no one is perfect. That's why pencils have erasers, because we all need something to work on. Even if it feels perfect, that draft might benefit from one last review, right? So don't be afraid to rewrite. And I'll leave you with this quote, which kind of helps sums up why we're spending time on narrative at all, and why it is that you may want to use narrative in your future writing endeavors. Okay, it's because stories in every aspect of our lives not only explain how something happened, help us feel like we're there in the situation, experiencing it ourselves, and they also inspire us to do better, to do differently.